Hello and welcome to RWR Plays TEW 2020. This is Chapter 36 of WCW Lives On, the series where we are playing as Eric Bischoff as if WCW continued to survive into 2001 instead of being bought by WWE as happened in real life. Now we're up to November, and today we are doing the Go Home episode of Monday Nitro and WCW Saturday Night ahead of Uncensored. Uncensored, of course, has been moved in the calendar to November. Before we bring you all that, I want to do a couple of things. First of all, I've got a couple of bits of news that I think will be interesting to show you about the world that is going on in the game. But also then we're going to recap what happened on the last show, and then we'll get to today's episode. So I said there's some news. First of all, WWF Survivor Series happened on the night before the Nitro I'm about to cover, and as you can see, it did a 91 rating as a quality in terms of the quality of the show. The attendance was 65,137, and in the main event, Chris Jericho defeated Curt Angle to retain the WWF World Heavyweight title, a 95 rated main event, which is everything they could have hoped for, I think, from that particular show. You notice there's no Rock, no Steve Austin, of course, because Austin is off as pursuing a political career. So headlined by Jericho and Curt Angle, this one. Edge and Christian defeated the Hardy Boys to retain the tag team titles in the semi-main. We also had Hollywood Hogan and Kane defeat the Ultimate Warrior and Shane McMahon. Can you imagine in 2001 a WWF feud between Hogan and Warrior? That would have been quite something, I'm sure. Chris Benoit defeated Mick Foley in another really good match, 93 rated contest. But those are the highlights. A decent show for the WWF. Now, talking about decent shows, last week we put on an 82 rated Monday Nitro, which we will recap in just a moment, but an 82 rated show. Now, if you compare that to the corresponding week of WWF television, you will see that we've done pretty well. I'm just struggling to find where the show history is, and I can't do it right now. Why can I do that? There we go. So this is the last week's television, and you'll notice Raw did an 82 and SmackDown did an 82. So our programming, I think for the first time ever in game so far in this save, was as good as Raw and SmackDown from last week. So that's a really big, major kind of, I guess, stepping stone or landmark that we've reached here, which means that we're on the right path to where we want to go with WCW in the long run. One last bit of news to give you. So after the last episode, I noticed that in the news section, IWA Puerto Rico had been disbanded after being taken over by the WWF. So the WWF have taken over this company. They bought IWA Puerto Rico. I'm not really sure what for, because to my understanding they have not increased their titles or anything. They haven't kept the titles, I don't think so. They're all WWF stuff, and if I just look at the retired titles, yes, all of the IWA titles are there. So it's not like they kept any of them going. Maybe they'll bring one of them back or something, I don't know. But anyway, they haven't done that. They've purchased the company. Maybe it saw an increase in popularity in Puerto Rico, but I doubt it. They were already maybe a slight increase, but I don't think there was any increase in Puerto Rico as a consequence of the sale of or the purchase, I should say, of IWA Puerto Rico. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense other than they've just eliminated another company. But that's perhaps a quirk of the game here. I think I mentioned it in my features I'd like to see about a future TEW game, is that, you know, they've got to overhaul the takeover system within the game, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense at this point, in my opinion. It's a bit too gamey as opposed to feeling realistic. Okay, so as I say, we're going to go through last time on the show, and it was a pretty decent one. As I said, a show rating of 82. Had three really major matches, including Steiner versus Sting, which did an 87 rating. And in that match, Steiner booked his place in the final of the Starrcade series and the main event of Uncensored by defeating him and securing victory in Group A of the tournament. So Steiner wins Group A. He will take on whoever wins Group B in the final of the Starrcade series at Uncensored. Also, last week on the show, we saw DDP and Booker T have an in-ring confrontation ahead of their world title clash at Uncensored, during which Canyon and Bam Bam Bigelow appeared, and after DDP rejected their offer to take out Booker T for him, the pair attacked DDP and Booker T, but their attack was repelled, with Booker T and DDP standing strong at the end of the episode, but still seeming uneasy with one another afterwards. We also saw Group B action as Bill Goldberg defeated Shane Douglas and Vampiro beat Ric Flair with the help of Shane Douglas in the second round of matches there. That left Goldberg on top of the group after 2 wins in a row, while Flair and Vampiro each had a victory apiece. Later on in the night, Goldberg, in an interview after these matches, warned Shane Douglas to stay away during Goldberg's match with Flair on this week's show, and that will headline the Nitro we're about to bring you. We also saw the Headhunters debut in WCW and attack Tommy Dreamer and Terry Funk and leave them in a bloody mess at the end of that particular angle. And finally, Bobby Roode issued an open challenge which will be answered by somebody this week on Nitro. So plenty of happenings on last week's show, but it's now time to get to this week's, so let's go there now. Okay, so this time around we are at the Pavilion at ARC in California. And the show begins with Mike Tenay and Jerry Lawler at the commentary table running down the card for the evening. They remind everyone that the final 3 Starrcade Series group matches take place tonight, with Bill Goldberg battling Ric Flair and Vampiro taking on Shane Douglas, and Scott Steiner awaiting the group winner at Uncensored in the final of the tournament. They also reveal that Eric Bischoff has booked a mega tag match for the evening, as Booker T and DDP will team together just 6 days before their collision at Uncensored for the WCW title to battle Canyon and Bam Bam Bigelow, and they speculate as to whether DDP and Booker T can coexist in the match. So this got a segment rating of 61 and was a good way to kick things off on this week's show. This is followed by the first match of the night, which is Billy Kidman versus Mike Sanders, a match that goes 10 minutes and 53 seconds and is won by Kidman by pinfall. The match also had a lot of interference, so we had John Cena and Jeff Jarrett get involved, as well as Conan and Rey Mysterio Jr. as these two factions continue their war. The segment rating here is 59, Billy Kidman a rating of 62, Mike Sanders a rating of 41. As I said, the feud between these two factions continue. And they continue to fight after the match, with referees and officials attempting to break them up. Eric Bischoff then ends up coming out and demanding they stop. He then tells them that he's booking a match for Uncensored between Conan and Jeff Jarrett, where he will suspend any member of the Jarrett administration or the Filthy Animals that interferes in the match. So this got a segment rating of 61 with chaos all around. Bischoff came across well. Jeff Jarrett also looked excellent. Kidman and John Cena didn't perform particularly well, but overall a decent segment here and set up a match at the next pay-per-view between Conan and Jeff Jarrett. The next match is the first of the 2 matches in Group B of the Starrcade series, as Vampiro takes on Shane Douglas, and this one ends in a double disqualification. And the reason it ends in a disqualification is that it escalates in personal nature as it goes on, and eventually both men refuse to be broken up by the referee, so he disqualifies them both for a double DQ. Segment rating of 64. Both of them had a decent in-ring performance, but of course this was 2 heels against one another, so the segment rating suffered a little bit, and of course probably the end as well didn't help that particular thing either. After the bout, Douglas and Vampiro engage in a standoff where they are also joined by their stable mates. Before the 2 groups can come to blows, however, Sean O'Haire arrives on the scene and goes after the Gothic Collective. In all the chaos, O'Haire is hauled away by security, and Vampiro is furious that O'Haire managed to get to them. Afterwards, the commentators talk about how this has been a wild night already and still there is so much more to come. A segment rating here of 57, as Sean O'Haire manages to get a little bit of a one-up on the Gothic Collective, although obviously was also hauled away by security. After this, Bobby Roode comes to the ring, and the commentators remind us that he has issued an open challenge last week for anybody to face him, and it is revealed that Balls Mahoney is the man who has taken up the challenge. A segment rating here of 15, not a particularly good segment, and that might also mean that the match itself struggles to hold the fans' attention. Indeed, a segment rating of 25 is not particularly good here. Bobby Roode defeats Balls Mahoney in 7:50 by pinfall with a handful of tights. And yeah, you can see the crowd were turned off by having a match outside of the pre-show between workers they don't have any investment in. Bobby Roode had an in-ring performance of 35, Balls Mahoney a 43, but Bobby Roode sustained a thigh muscle strain during this one, so it'll be interesting to see if he has to have time out as a consequence of that one. Next up, Mike Tenay throws the cameras back to Tony Schiavone, who reveals he is in Eric Bischoff's office, where Sting has been asked to meet Bischoff. Bischoff commiserates Sting on his loss to Scott Steiner last week, but says he has some good news. He says that after his victory against Mike Awesome 2 weeks ago, Sting has once again been named a #1 contender to the US title by the WCW Championship Committee, and will face Awesome in another rematch between the two at Uncensored for the belt. So a segment rate here of 68, a little bit disappointing given Sting's star power. Tony Schiavone underperformed, but Sting came out of it looking excellent. Then we get the final Group A match in the Starrcade series, a match that didn't actually mean very much because of the fact that Scott Steiner has won the group on the previous week's episode, but nonetheless they have the match, and Awesome gets the victory in 15 minutes and 9 seconds by pinfall. During the match, the commentators discuss how distracting it must be for Mike Awesome entering this match, having just found out about his match versus Sting in 6 days' time at Uncensored for the US title. Despite that, Awesome got the victory. Hennig was a 68 here, Awesome a 78, and the two have great chemistry, so it's just a shame that Curt Hennig is still in the game, a heel, and therefore his match against Mike Awesome did suffer ratings wise because of that. But all the same, the crowd got hotter from this one. Then we have a backstage segment where Sharmell Sullivan is with Nick Gage and the Headhunters. Sullivan asks Gage what he's doing here with the two men that brutally attacked Tommy Dreamer and Terry Funk last week. Gage says that nobody should be surprised that it was him behind the attack on Dreamer and Funk. He says that when they decided to try and make a fool of him a few weeks back, he wasn't going to take it lightly, and he went and reached out to the two most dangerous, mean monsters he could find, the Headhunters. He then brags about the job the Headhunters did and promises that nobody will make a joke at his expense again. So a segment rating here of 27. Sharmell Sullivan and Nick Gage were not particularly good kind of directing this segment, and the Headhunters just stayed in the background looking menacing. Not a great segment, but we continue with this story between Nick Gage, Dreamer and Funk that now also includes the Headhunters. The next match is the tag team match that was advertised at the top of the show. Booker T and DDP take on Kanyon and Bam Bam Bigelow. And here, Booker T and DDP get the victory in 16 minutes and 38 when Booker T pins Bigelow. You can see the Diamond Dallas Page had a rating of 63 and Booker T a 64. Kanyon, however, was the top performer in the match, a 66 for him. A segment rating of 73, but Booker T seemed off his game, and you can see here DDP and Booker T don't work well as a team either. Not a big deal because we're not looking to have them tag up regularly against one another. But all the same, they came out on top despite their lack of cohesion. And what's clear between the two is that they are not particularly happy with one another. So some of the tags the pair make to one another during this match are less than friendly. And also after getting the victory, DDP walks away from Booker T when he offers his hand in friendship. Next, we go backstage to Tony Schiavone, who introduces his guests at this time, Air Raid, and asks them what their game plan is at Uncensored when they fight the FBI for the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles. AJ Styles says they don't really do game plans and tend to thrive best on their instincts. And Air Paris adds that they feel that they have the instincts to beat the FBI on Sunday. At that point, Rey Mysterio Jr. arrives and wishes them good luck for their match and hopes they win the titles. Styles and Paris wish Rey Mysterio Jr. well in return. So segment rate here of 50, pretty decent segment in general actually. Air Paris underperformed, but AJ Styles clearly enjoyed having the freedom to go off script and performed well, which is really a really good sign for the future for AJ Styles. Rey Mysterio Jr.'s performance was also good. And then it's time for the main event. Bill Goldberg versus Ric Flair in the last match of the Starrcade Series group stages. The commentators reminded everyone prior to this one that with Goldberg on 2 wins and Flair on 1, that if Flair won the match, he would be winner of Group B due to head-to-head record. However, Goldberg gets the victory, and segment rating here of only 69, which is really disappointing, especially when you consider Goldberg had an in-ring performance of 84 and Flair a 71. Now, I know they're both baby faces, but I felt like there could have been a bit more of a decent rating for this one. So could be a problem for us in terms of the segment rating here, this being the main event, but we'll see afterwards. After the match, once Ric Flair had recovered, he approached Bill Goldberg and shook his hand and pats him on the back as Goldberg looks ahead to the final of the Starrcade series at Uncensored, so a segment rating here of 69. Then, after Flair leaves the ring area, Goldberg is celebrating with the crowd when Scott Steiner's music hits and he walks out onto the entrance stage. Steiner has a microphone and he tells Goldberg to be ready for their fight on Sunday night. The commentators make one last plug for the pay-per-view before the show goes off the air. So segment rating, we end with 79, which is a decent performed segment here. Both Steiner and Goldberg looked fantastic as they prepare for the final of the Starrcade series in the main event of Uncensored in 6 days' time. So that was Monday Nitro. And a little bit of a strain for us, especially after the 82 rated show we got last time. This one only getting to 70, and that's largely down to Goldberg and Flair. Despite putting on a good match, it's suffering in terms of heat because of the fact they're both baby faces. Maybe we should have put Booker T and DDP on last against Canyon and Bam Bam Bigelow, but even that only did a 73. So in general, not as strong an episode of Nitro as the one we did the previous week. Saying that, however, it doesn't look like we've lost any popularity in any of the regions that the show was seen, and therefore this is not a big deal. Just not too much of an increase of our popularity. So that is Monday Nitro, but we go now to WCW Saturday Night. Okay, so it's on to WCW Saturday Night. Before we give you the details of what took place, the TV taping itself got 4,362 people for this show, so that's a really decent attendance for a Nitro and Saturday Night taping. The Saturday Night show begins with Sharmell Sullivan welcoming to the ring the franchise players. She announces that at Uncensored, it has now been made official. It will be the 3 of them against Ric Flair and the Wyndham Brothers in a 6-man tag match, and she asks Douglas to give his thoughts. Douglas says that he stayed away from the ring on Nitro in the match between Goldberg and Flair because he didn't have anything to prove to either of them. He continues that last month at Halloween Havoc, he defeated Flair 1-2-3, and but for some underhanded tactics by the Nature Boy, he'd have done the same in the Starrcade series. Sullivan says, speaking of the Starrcade series, how is Douglas feeling about only walking away from the tournament with 1 point? Douglas says that he's not interested in talking about that anymore. The Starrcade series is over and done with for him. All he's interested in is handing out yet more punishment to Ric Flair, and he says that Chronic here are more than pumped to dish out some to the Wyndham Brothers as well. Segment rating here of 48. I thought this might have been a little bit better, but nonetheless, despite Shane Douglas doing a masterful job and being a real star in the segment, it's still only made a 48, which is a shame. The first match of the night is the Headhunters' debut in-ring in WCW, and they defeat Bobby Eaton and Lash LaRue in this tag match in 6 minutes and 10 seconds when Headhunter A pins Lash LaRue after a splash. It got a segment rating of 32. The Headhunters were 30 and 33 rated, whilst Bobby Eaton got a 46 rating and Lash LaRue just a 37. Apparently this was another match where the crowd didn't have enough investment in the people involved to really turn it into anything better than what it was. Then we go backstage as Sharmell Sullivan welcomes Alexis Lurie for an interview and asks about her recent Nitro debut where she and Rey Mysterio Jr. defeated Kana and the Great Sasuke. Lurie says that it was an honor to appear on Nitro and a thrill to team with Rey Mysterio Jr. Sullivan asks her whether she feels it gives her the confidence that she can now beat Kana were they to meet again in the future, given their previous draw against one another. And Lurie says she has always had confidence, but now she is convinced of her ability to get victory in any future match between the two. A segment in here of 25 as the Canna and Alexis Lurie feud anyway, continues, but neither Sullivan nor Lurie performed well enough here to make this better than a 25 rated segment. Next up, Jim Duggan takes on Johnny Jeter in a squash match of sorts, 5 minutes and 4 seconds. This one lasted for another low segment rating, this one only 24. Jim Duggan's performance was a 44, but Jeter a 16. And to top it all off, Jim Duggan seemed off his game as well. So, not a lot to say about that one. Next, Sharmell Sullivan welcomes Chavo Guerrero Jr. for an interview backstage. She asks Guerrero what his prediction is for Sunday's match between the Great Sasuke and Rey Mysterio Jr., having wrestled both men in the past. Chavo says that personally he doesn't care which of them walks away from the match with the title, but says he will be watching closely because whoever wins, he intends to be the man to take the title from them. So segment rating here 40, a little bit better. Sharmell Sullivan improvised well throughout the segment as well, so that's good. Next up is another match in the women's round robin, and here Angel Orsini defeated Jazz in 6 minutes and 57 seconds by pinfall with a fast roll-up. And that's significant because going into this, Jazz had a record of 4 wins, 1 draw and no losses, while Orsini had 3 wins and 2 losses, and therefore Orsini needed to win to keep herself in with a chance of taking overall victory, and she did indeed get it. Unfortunately, despite that context, the segment rating only got a 19, and again, this is because the women still aren't really being invested in by the crowd, possibly because we just keep featuring them on Saturday night and also are only putting them in matches with one another, which isn't really helping their overall level of popularity. To top that off, Orsini seemed off of her game as well, so that didn't really help matters. Their performances were a 26 and a 25, so not poor ratings individually, but the segment rating didn't really work out. Whatever the case, Orsini gets the victory, and therefore the round robin goes into its final month next month with it all still to play for. Next up, Sharmell Sullivan manages to catch up with Jeff Jarrett for an interview. Sullivan asks Jarrett whether Conan now holds the psychological edge going into Uncensored due to the ruling made by Eric Bischoff that anybody from either the Filthy Animals or the Jarrett administration will be suspended if they interfere. Jarrett says that Sullivan has got to be joking. He says that, if anything, it just makes a victory for him even more likely. He says that Conan is the reason he is standing here without the WCW World Heavyweight title, and on Sunday he's going to make him pay. A segment rating here of 57. Jeff Jarrett came out of this looking excellent, but Sharmell Sullivan performed poorly in general, and Jarrett struggled going off script, so some contradictory kind of feedback on this segment, but nonetheless, segment rating of 57 as we see the last promotion really for Jarrett and Conan at Uncensored. And then the main event is Norman Smiley versus Lex Luger, and this one went to another double disqualification between these two, following the double disqualification that happened the previous week on the show between their respective partners. Norman Smiley had an in-ring performance of 54, Luger a 58, and the reason the double disqualification came about was because of interference from both their partners. And once again, after the match, there's a big brawl featuring both teams, mirroring exactly what took place on the previous week's show. And they are still fighting one another when the show goes off the air to end the TV taping. A segment rating of 44, this one got. So that is everything on Saturday night. Not a stellar episode of Saturday night. I was a bit disappointed with one or two of the segments, and the match quality in general wasn't very high either. So, as I say, not a particularly good episode of Saturday night. Not that it particularly matters anyway. That's also the end of the TV taping, and our next episode, of course, will be WCW Uncensored itself. We've got 8 matches that have been lined up for the show, so I'm looking forward to bringing that to you in the next episode. I'm just going to show you very quickly recap, I guess, very quickly what the pre-booking is for that show. So we've got on Uncensored, Bill Goldberg versus Scott Steiner, obviously in the main event in the Starrcade Series final, with the winner going on to face whoever the champion is at Starrcade. The champion will be decided between Booker T and DDP, Booker T defending the WCW title against DDP at the show. Great Sasuke defends the Cruiserweight title against Rey Mysterio Jr. Jeff Jarrett and Conan will battle each other in a match where neither members of either of their factions can get involved. In fact, we've got two bookings for Conan versus Jeff Jarrett, so that's a mistake. We've also got the FBI defending their Cruiserweight Tag Team titles against Air Raid, a 6-man tag match, which will see the franchise players take on Ric Flair and the Wyndham Brothers, and Totally Buffed to take on the European Union in a tag team title match. The match that, of course, I'm missing from that list is the US title match between Mike Awesome and Sting, which was announced on Monday Nitro on this week's taping. So a pretty strong lineup for Uncensored as we go into it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, what kind of match ratings we get for some of these contests. I think it's going to be, a really interesting night of action. Let's have a quick look at what happened on Raw, of course, the night after Survivor Series this year, and you can see there Hardy Boys versus Dangerous by Design got a 97 rating. Raven and William Regal against the Hardy Boys. That's a good rating for them. Unfortunately for the WWE, it didn't headline. That was reserved for Hollywood Hogan against Bubba Ray Dudley, which only got a rating of 77. We also had a match between Big Show and Rikishi. So, a mixed bag of stuff, I guess you could say, for Raw this week. Anyway, that is everything from me for today's episode. As I say, the next big one is Uncensored. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like. I haven't said that once during the course of this show up to this point. So also subscribe to continue to follow along with the episodes as they come in. We are, of course, going to go at least all the way to Starrcade. So that means that there's still, I think, 6 episodes for definite that we're going to be bringing out. And we may go beyond that. It will depend really on what viewership is looking like for the series by the time we do Starrcade, and whether we're getting the same level of interest and likes for the series as we have done up to this point. As I say, that's everything from me. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time.